guys? Gonz here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. This is going to be a little different video here today. I'm just going to share my thoughts on stuff that has been not bothering me, that might be too strong of a word, but definitely on my mind quite a bit. And it has something to do with the Middle East and the church and some things going on with that whole relationship between the US and Israel and all that stuff. I'm really fairly new to the topic, and so I really didn't have an opinion about it until about a year ago. I started really digging into it. I kind of just went with the status quo until then, like, oh yes, we 100% support Israel. And I still do support Israel, as far as the Jewish people that live there and stuff, but I'm just coming into so much information that is troubling. So I'm going to share my thoughts here a little bit and see about getting some feedback and why I came into this topic in general. Well, I've looked at secret societies and the New Age movement and the supernatural elements and paranormal stuff and all that stuff for a while. But one topic that I really not avoided, but definitely was not my strength, was the issue of the Middle East. It was just so confusing. I didn't know what was going on in terms of what's really happening. There's all this stuff in the news, but, we can't really trust mainstream news outlets and stuff. And there were conflicting reports, and everybody has an opinion about the Middle East. Everyone has an opinion about Israel and the Jew world order. And there's just all kinds of stuff out there. So that was really a confusing element for me. So I put it on the back burner. It was like, I'll address it when I come to that point. Well, that point came about a year ago. I started fellowshipping with Christians and Bible prophecy, scholars and authors and stuff that have been at this for a very long time. And some of these folks were over twice my age. And so they had quite a bit of experience, quite a bit of knowledge about Bible prophecy and just a good understanding of what's going on in the world in terms of geopolitics and the Middle East and all that stuff. So I got into a lot of discussions with them, asking them questions, trying to learn as much as I can about the topic. Because again, I hadn't really formed a true opinion about it. But in that process, I started to notice some discrepancies. And, I can't really list everything out here, but for example, in Genesis 12:3, there's a line that says, "I will bless those who bless you," talking about Israel, "and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." And, it's talking about Israel, and you will hear a lot of Bible prophecy people, more of the traditional view, use that verse to say, look, if we bless Israel, then we are blessed. If you curse Israel, we are cursed. And there have even been authors who have written books about how when our presidents and stuff turn our back on the nation of Israel, the politics of Israel, then, we are struck with hurricanes or earthquakes or something bad happens. And I have my opinions about what's really going on there, but I will reserve that opinion for now. And, I started to think like, okay, I can understand that sentiment of like, yeah, support Israel. But then of course, there's all this information out there against not necessarily Israel, but sort of the Jewish, world order kind of thing, And earlier on, I had run into a video by Chuck Missler that said, this Jew world order thing is ridiculous. It's just complete nonsense. And so I really was kind of like, okay, I'm getting like conflicting reports, conflicting information. And I started to really struggle with it. Like, what's going on here? The Christians are saying, oh, you got to support Israel. And then on the other hand, you have folks that are like, no, man, look at what they're doing. It's like what they're doing is evil. And, they have all sorts of examples of that. And so for me, it was like when there's a strong division, and this is what happened to me with my faith. It was when I was in college, and a lot of, professors, secular college professors were just kind of like, there was one professor that said, and I believe it was a psychology class that I was taking because I was originally a psychology major. The psychology teacher basically said that if you are a Christian, then, be prepared for your faith to be shattered because we will show why the belief in Christianity is false. And I'm like, Okay. And I wasn't even a Christian then, and I'm going, why are they attacking Christianity so badly? Why is it so one-sided, And so that kind of thinking, whenever I see a split of belief, of opinion, even of conviction, you can call this, I question like, okay, what's really going on? I want to really dig into the truth of the matter. And this is where I'm at right now with the whole Israel issue. I'm at that point where I'm kind of in no man's land. It's like, okay, yes, I hear all the people talk about we have to support Israel. Yes, we and really my suspicions were even heightened when Netanyahu just recently spoke here in the US, and that sort of, and just the reaction of all the believers that were like, oh my gosh, God bless Netanyahu. He's, he speaks the truth and all this stuff. But then on the other side of the aisle, I'm hearing like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Netanyahu, can you believe that Zionist, Freemason, that, just complete evil, just telling lies. This sort of division gives me pause, and it makes me wonder what's really going on. And I think the reality of what's going on is that it's a spiritual war. It's a spiritual conspiracy. And, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of people that will say, and I've gotten this too on, just posting videos. I've seen comments like this where it's like, why aren't you talking about the Vatican? It's the Pope. It's the papacy. They're the Antichrist. You got to expose the Jesuits more. And there are definitely ministries that do that. Chris Pinto, I think, has done a pretty good job of showing some faults or some problems with the papacy and, the Jesuit history and stuff like that. And then on the other side, you have a lot of these like, oh, you got to get after the Jews. They're the ones trying to take over the world. They're part of the New World Order. They're trying to do this. And there's some good evidence for that. There's undeniable evidence for that. And then there's kind of this like, it gets ugly with the whole Israel Jewish thing, because once you criticize anything that Israel, the political system, does, you're automatically labeled anti-Semitic, and you're labeled just a bigot. And this is what I was seeing with this group of elder Christians, because I wasn't challenging their views because I had an opposing view. I was challenging their views to test, to see how strong their views are and how to deal with some of those opposing positions. And what I got was a lot of, well, that's anti-Semitic. Well, then you're going to usher in the second Holocaust. And that kind of verbiage really raised my suspicions. Now, they may not be wrong about their position. And I'm not going to base the truthfulness of the matter based on some people that have, responded a certain way to certain things. That's kind of a genetic fallacy there if I'm doing that. But in terms of the idea of, just because you deny their, I don't support Israel politically, you're automatically anti-Semitic. That was troubling to me. And then what really got to me was when I started sharing some of Chris White's work. And Chris White came out with a book called False Christ: Will the Antichrist Claim to be the Jewish Messiah? And he also has a book called Mystery Babylon: When Jerusalem Embraces the Antichrist. And both of those books aren't anti-Semitic. They're not anti-Jewish. They're not racist books. They're just biblical books. They're looking at the Bible saying, look, here's what I found. You can't fault me for that. Look at the evidence. But then the reaction I'm getting from these folks that I was fellowshipping with was, if you buy into Chris White's theory, you are literally going to buy into the second Holocaust. You're an anti-Semite if you adhere to that theory. You are a Jew hater. And man, that sort of thinking really bothered me, because it was like, whoa, wait a minute. I've read both those books. I actually endorse those books because I think they're so good in terms of, research, biblical commentary. Probably one of the best out there in terms of, looking at who the Antichrist will be and how he will present himself and all that stuff. And not that we're saying we know for sure, but definitely I think if you're going to tear down Chris White's arguments in his books, do it thoroughly, because I haven't heard anything other than ad hominems at this point. But they don't really like that. They just stick to their guns in terms of calling me or, saying that I'm leading down the path to anti-Semitism and stuff like that. So again, very troubling to me. And, it gets worse because now, there's folks out there saying that, it was the Israelis who were behind 9/11, the whole conspiracy there. And, I mean, at that point, I'm like, okay, that's ridiculous. But then you look at the evidence and it's like, oh, all right, that's a little uncomfortable. I don't think it's definitive evidence to support that, but a little uncomfortable in terms of, and I'm not saying I agree with that view. And here's what the point of this video is. One, I want to ask you guys, what do you guys think about this issue of the Middle East and, America supporting Israel? And, should we, because it's a really divisive issue. There's really just two sides, or, there's several sides, but two real big sides of the issue, which is, one is, you got to be against the New World Order, which is run and operated by the Jewish system, the fake Jews, if you want to call them that. And then the other side of the aisle is we support Israel 100% based on, Genesis 12. And, there's biblical prophecy being fulfilled. It was fulfilled with the rebuilding of the nation in one day and stuff like that. And even those passages that I've looked at, at one point I was like, absolutely, that was 100% of fulfillment of Bible prophecy. 1948, the nation of Israel coming back, 100% Bible prophecy fulfilled. But then I started looking at, the entire context of the chapters and looking at the entirety of the situation, not just isolated verses and stuff like that. And of course, I'm guilty of doing some of that too, of like isolated verses and, connecting it with different things and stuff like that. For example, yesterday I did the Gravity Falls video, and I said that Mabel, the character, was wearing a key t-shirt indicating the key to the bottomless pit. And, you guys have to realize, and I think most of you guys are smart enough to realize, I'm not saying that Mabel is the angel with the key to the bottomless pit. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is the type of imagery they are using, and isn't it interesting that there is biblical reference to stuff like that? I'm not saying that Mabel is a fulfillment of this passage. So yeah, getting back to this whole, Israel 1948 thing, I started looking at some of that, and I'm not as convinced that it was a fulfillment. Now, I think Bible prophecy is not a one-to-one fulfillment type thing. I think it's cyclical, and I've tried to visualize this, and if I get a chance to do it, I think I will do it. But picture a series of concentric rings, and imagine each ring is divided up into several sections. And imagine that the alignment of a certain pattern all the way out, every single ring is a fulfillment of prophecy, like a whole prophecy. Well, I think that throughout history, one or two may click, or a series or a pattern may emerge that clicks to any given prophecy, but it's not a complete fulfillment. It's only a partial fulfillment. So that's kind of what I picture, and that's what I felt the Lord showed me when I was actually thinking about this issue. I was thinking, God, show me something that's kind of like what's going on with this. And that's kind of the vision that I got, was that this idea of concentric rings and how there is this ultimate fulfillment. But throughout history, there are partial fulfillments of passages, and that's just the nature of reality, and that's just how God's word is. It's alive, it's living. God tells the truth before it happens, and so that's kind of what I pictured. So in terms of that, I think, yes, 1948 is a partial fulfillment of biblical prophecy, but if you look at the context of the whole of some of those chapters, it's talking about literally like the return of Jesus, the restoring of the kingdom. So in that case, I have a hard time believing that this Israel that we have now, this nation of Israel, is the restoration of God's kingdom on earth. And let me just give you an example of that. Ezekiel 36, when you go down to verse 24, it says, I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. Okay. Yeah. When you look at that, it's like, whoa, that did happen in 1948 to some extent, depending on who you talk to. But the majority consensus is that, yeah, this happened. The nation of Israel, the Jews were able to gather back in their homeland. But then you keep reading, and it's like, I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your uncleanliness, and from all your idols I will cleanse you. Well, I don't know if that happened, to that extent. And then you read the next line, and I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I don't know about that either. And then you read verse 27, and I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. Okay, all right. Not really seeing that either. You shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I will be your God. Definitely not happening there. The nation of Israel as a whole. And then verse 29, and I will deliver you from all your uncleanliness, and I will summon the grain and make it abundant and lay no famine upon you. Okay, and some people have argued, yeah, look, they cultivated the land again. There's abundance of, farming and all this stuff booming in Israel. So, okay, so there's a partial fulfillment there. All right, that's like 2 out of, 4 or 5 verses. And then verse 30, I will make the fruit of the tree and the increase of the field abundant, that you may never again suffer the disgrace of famine among the nations. Okay, that might be possible. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you will loathe yourselves for your iniquities and your abominations. And everyone will say, oh, see, it says Israel will regather in unbelief. But wait a minute, that's not what it says. It says that God's going to restore everybody from the nations into the land of Israel, and then he's going to clean them, and then there will be a time when iniquity will be found in them again. So, again, it's like, all right, sort of. I mean, it says you will remember your evil ways. So was there a period of time after 1948 when the Jews came back into Israel and they were like purified and cleansed and all this stuff without Christ? They're not being saved. They're just being cleaned. And then they just remember their evil ways like right away or something. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then verse 32, it is not for your sake that I will act, declares the Lord God. Let that be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Israel. So again, this whole idea of regathered in unbelief. And that will be thrown around. Oh, they're regathered in unbelief. And there's a few other places. And I know you guys are probably going to be, well, what about, that passage in Zechariah and all this stuff? I get it. There's other passages that have that. But it's the same thing. It's like 1 or 2 verses that kind of provide a quote or a statement like Israel will be gathered in unbelief. That prophecy is fulfilled. And I think it's a little more complex than that. I think you're partially right if you say that. But anyway, again, I'm still trying to figure all this out. This is a very challenging topic for me, and I know it's a really touchy subject. And the reason why I wanted to bring this out and just kind of ramble about this is because it's shaping my perspective of how to go about my book, which is The Cosmic Endgame, which I'm really talking about a secret space program and all this like other stuff. But I think this topic really has something to do with it, especially if Chris White and his theories that he's presented is correct. And I think biblically speaking, it's a really, really good study. And if you haven't studied those things, I might actually go through some of the stuff he went through and make videos out of it, because I think it deserves more, widespread knowledge about, that stuff. And again, I think that, yeah, of course, people are going to say, oh, you're anti-Semitic. And again, it falls into that same sort of thing. And I actually think that itself, the fact that people will label it so quickly anti-Semitic and stuff like that, that itself is part of a propaganda machine that's been at play for a long time to create this image of, oh, if anybody speaks against the Jews, you're automatically anti-Semitic. And it's like, wait a minute, we're not speaking out against the race. We're not speaking about the religion. We're speaking out against, the political systems, just in the same way that, not every American, you can speak out against the US government and, you're not anti-American. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just have a difficult time soaking all this in and then trying to put it in a way and put it cohesive enough in my thoughts to present it back out in a way that's going to be understandable and digestible, because this is such a huge topic. And the other part of it that I think is missed by a lot of these researchers and stuff that talk against the nation of Israel and stuff. And again, I'm not saying I'm against the nation of Israel. Okay, this is, again, I'm in that sort of middle ground right now. I'm trying to figure out what's really going on. There was an interview with Dr. Future, and he spoke to Derek Gilbert at A View from the Bunker just recently. And you guys should all listen to that interview, because Dr. Future is a guy who 30 years, believed in one thing, the whole, Hal Lindsey sort of Bible prophecy view. And based on his research while writing his books, plural, he's writing like 8 books at once or something, his views changed on some of this stuff. And I've been in dialogue with him behind the scenes, and, he agreed to have an interview for my book, and we're going to interview him on Canary Cry Radio. But he found a lot of disturbing things from the Israeli press themselves about using mystical Judaism, using Kabbalah, basically, and a lot of the rabbis and leaders of Orthodox Judaism, which is not the same Judaism from the Bible, is what he really wanted to point out. And he had some very, very strong views that would be a problem and a challenge to a lot of Christians out there right now who hook, line, and sinker believe the mainstream pop view about Israel as a geopolitical issue. So I'll link to that in the description section. You guys should definitely listen to that. I'm going to wrap it up here. I've been rambling here for quite a while, so I'll provide a few more resources in the description section of both pro and con. Again, this topic is so divisive. You go on the internet and you'll find stuff for or against, and just both sides of the aisle. It's really messy. It's a messy topic. But I do want to say something, one last thing before I go here. The issue here, I think, that's really going on, because, again, people will say, oh, it's the Jesuits. You got to point out the Catholic Church. You got to point out Rome. And then they'll say, oh, it's the Jews. You got to point out the Jews. They're the ones behind it all. And then you have, oh, it's like this evil cabal. It's like a group even higher than that of occultists or Satanists or something like that. What's really going on here, ultimately, is Satan. Satan is the one who is behind this quote-unquote conspiracy. Psalm 2 says this. It says, why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let's break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. So ultimately what's happening is Satan has organized this conspiracy against the Lord and his anointed. And so all of this stuff, whether it be Rome, whether it be, the Jew world order, whatever you want to call it. And again, that's not Jewish people. The same way with Rome, you're not going against Catholics. I got tons of Catholic friends, they're great people. I have Jewish friends, and they're good people. So it's not a racial, it's not an ethnic, it's not a religious label when we talk about Rome, or we talk about Israel, or the Jewish conspiracy and stuff like that. That's not what's going on. It is not a racial issue. It's not a religious issue. It's an issue with the leadership, with the elite, with a small group of people that are behind it. And that's why when you read Psalm 2, and I'm going to read it again in ESV here, in the ESV it says, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? And then, if the New International Version, I know some of you guys have a problem with the NIV, and I get that. I'm not going to address that in this video, but NIV, it says, why did the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? And then verse 2 in the ESV, the kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointing. So all of this is conspiring to go against God and his people. And it's interesting because when you get caught up in looking at this stuff and pointing at one group, we always say Illuminati or the New World Order. And I think that's okay because it's generalized. We're not pinning it down on Rome or, the Jew World Order or whatever. I think it's a bigger conspiracy anyway. So when I say Illuminati, when I say New World Order, I'm referring to that spiritual conspiracy. I'm referring to, yes, a group of people, whatever ethnicity or religion they might be, but it's a group of people that are in power, that are ultimately themselves being deceived by the lie of Satan, that, they're going to rule and they're going to have power and all this stuff. So ultimately, I know that's what's going on. When you start going below that, that's when you start having issues with, geopolitics. When you start looking at all that, then I think you get caught in different sort of groupings or, thought groups and belief systems that bind one with certain nations. And it just gets really messy. It gets divisive is, I guess, the word I'm looking for. And, but it plays into the book I'm writing because I think this ultimate high up group or whatever, they have technologies that will deploy as part of this whole global conspiracy thing. So, that's kind of where I'm going with all this. But again, I'm still struggling with where I should land my plane kind of thing. I'm still sort of up above looking at everything going, oh man, it is an ugly landscape. And I'm glad I can keep going up to the Lord because that's where ultimately the truth is. But give me your thoughts on this, guys. Sorry, I rambled again, but give me your thoughts on this, comment on this, keep it legit. You know, people get pretty nasty in there in the comment section. Again, I don't like banning people, and I really haven't. This is an issue that I'm going to try to wade through, and if I'm ever going to teach on it, I have to get a grasp on it, right? So that's kind of where I'm going with all this too, is like, if I'm going to write about it, make videos about it, teach about it, you know, I want to make sure that the information I have is correct, number one, but whatever view I present, you know, whatever presuppositions I come from, that it's actually rooted in scripture, with the truth of God. And that's really where I want to point everything anyway. So anyway, all right, I got that off my chest. That's the video for today. I'm sorry it was not as exciting as CERN, or, you know, I know the Kenthoven thing's going on right now and stuff, but I had to get this off my chest. And so looking forward to hearing some feedback. God bless, guys.